Having completed all this information across into the site analysis drawing, just to this point where everything's just drawn in, detail lines and filled regions, text, and the title boundary has been drawn, and the bearings and distances are all reading correctly and they're tags, not text, so pretty happy with where I'm up to. Next stage we can do is moving on to plotting out the Toposolid, which will be our topographic representation of the land and the fall of the land. So this is our plan when we picked up all of the bit points out on site. You can see we've got D down the bottom here and E, and there's a couple of points around the back here too. So that line along the back, you need to make sure we've got that in place, which is 30 meters 300 back to the next boundary line. And we've also got Z. We've got Z over the back here as well, which is looks like it's into the bush by 10 meters each side. So we've got 10 meters, 10 meters. So we need to plot those lines into our site analysis as well, just to make sure that we've got that in there. So I'll make sure I draw those in before we get there. So reducing the levels, I've transferred all this information into a Word document. This one is the one we used at the grassy knoll. So I just opened up that Word document, saved it, popped the address in there so I can keep a track of it. I've then just transposed all that same information straight off that here, all of this information down here, popped in all the numbers, so just popped all that stuff in there. The change point is an interesting one, where you've got a change point, which is at point V. Now where's that on our PDF? Let's have a look. Point V, oh yeah, change point. So it looks like the staff stayed still, and the instrument and the tripod has been picked up and moved to a new location. So I've got two heights at the same place at V, but the actual staff, the big ruler, that stayed still, and the instrument was moved around to pick up the extra height. We just must have run out of height. It got down to 590. We weren't able to get right in around the corner to get down to AB. So point V, change point, we just put both of those numbers in at the same row across the top here, and when we do our reduced levels we shall go down and look at the difference between 480 and 590 and put that in as a rise or fall. Then the next one we take it from this one down to this one. So let's get started and we'll have a look at the first one. So we've got 2520 as our first, 2370, which is a lower number, therefore the staff has come up the hill a little bit, so whatever I put in here is going to be a rise. Let's open up the calculator app, bring that across, and we've got the 2520 minus 2370 is 150. So we have a rise of 150. Put that into the rise column, and I may as well add them as I go along. So we've got the 100,000, 150. And then move on to the next point. So the next point is a much bigger number. So it looks like this staff has dropped down the hill quite a lot. Let's just double check. I've got the TBM is the 100,000. We've got corner post, and then we've gone down to point B. I just do a quick check on that. So the TBM is that little communications pit at the front gate there. We've got A and then B. So that rings pretty true. I remember being on site where we went from point A at the gate down to the road there. That it did drop down into, it was virtually down into the gully, and probably C must come back up again onto the road, I think. So let's check that. C was up on the edge of the road, and it comes. So from the difference between these two, that's a bigger number, so it's a 4. So there, the number that I'm going to put in, the input will be going into that space there, and we'll work out the difference between those two. So 3540 minus 2370, it's 1170. So into the 4, 1170. And back to the calculator, I've got 100,150 minus 1170, 9898. So 9898 is the next point. Difference between these two looks like it's 30 millimeters, and this is a higher number. So the actual 3570, yeah, it's a higher number again, so that's actually gone further down. So the actual edge of seal is lower than point B. So we're going to have another fall here of 30. And we do our maths on that one. That should give us 98,950. Then we've got 48, so it's dropped down quite a lot again. So again, I'll do this last one and then leave you to do the rest. So we've got 48, then 35, 4800 minus 3570, enter, and we get 1230 between those 2 points, and that's a bigger number, so it's down a lot lower. So we come down to there to do the 1200, so what it was, 1230, and then we can work out the fall of that. I've got it written down here, so 4,97720, and we can then continue down reducing our levels as we go and just putting all that sort of thing in. So let me get it down to this point here, and we'll have a chat about how to get that bit there done. Okay, so I'm working my way down to point U now, and point U I've got is 480, and T is 290, so bigger number again. We've got a bit of a fall going on here. The difference between the 290 and 480 is 190 millimeters, and that's in the fall column. Reduce the level straight away. We should end up with 102,040 at that point there. So again, just subtracting the 190 from the 102,230, and that gets us that. The next one is the difference between the 590 and the 480. Again, bigger number, so this is a fall, and we're going to be putting our answer as an input into that column, that space there under fall heading. And 590, the difference between those two is 110, and we'll put that input in straight away, which is 101,930. Now to do the next one, we stop there. The foresight is the last recorded in a set of levels that have been taken. We've moved the staff, we've kept the staff in the same place, but we've picked up the instrument and the tripod and we've moved it, and we're starting a new set of levels that are all relative to each other. First one we took in that new set was where the staff was in exactly the same place at point V. So we start and we go the difference between these two, 25 to 20. This is a lower number, therefore we're in a rise because it's come up the hill. And we work out the difference between the 255 and the 2070. Which is 480, and again that's a higher number, this is a lower number, so we've gone up the hill, so it's a rise of that 480. And we'll put that straight in as our 102,410 and continue along on our merry way right down to the end. In fact, that last one is the last, so I should be putting that in that column to indicate the end at AB. So continue down doing that level booking sheet, and that will be the input that we use to create the topography that we're going to be putting in here. So before I can start drawing in my topographic with all the contours and everything, we need to complete put in a couple of extra guidelines. So back to the measure up, we've got a 10 meter to this line out along here, and this line here, and I need to put in this line along the bottom here as well, where we've got D, E, A, and AB, and Z. In order to plot those, I need to pop them into Revit, and I've got 3030 as the measurement there to get down to this other line. That's what that one's representing. So going back to the Revit plan, first thing I'll do is I'll turn do not crop the view and just turn that hide the crop view line out of there. That means that anything that's drawn outside of this line, outside of this box, let me just draw in a little detail line across through here, where you can see the line is not visible outside of the crop view, and we set up our crop view to suit the sheet, so that we're not drawing outside of our title block once this is on a sheet ready for printing. So I'll turn off the crop view so that line is now visible everywhere, and I'll just hide the crop region just temporarily. I'm going to turn that back on again later. Delete that line. So I'll run through a couple of methods. If I do detail line using, I'm going to do thin line is fine, I'll just leave it in thin. These are just going to be deleted anyway. Don't need to pop into the pencil box and pick out a different one. And I'll use the pick lines option, which is a pretty good way of drawing lines, particularly when you've already got something in place and you're going parallel with something. So we use the pick line, and we use an offset of 10 meters, 1, 2, 3, and if I come down and hover over the edge of that boundary line, you can see the green line appearing, and if I bring my cursor down a bit lower, that line will swap from which side. So it's got to favour one side or the other and then pick. So we want it onto that top side, so pick. Come around the corner up to the top and pick, and while the blue dots are there, I'll pick and drag just to extend that line down, and pick modify to finalize the command. To put the 30 meter 300 line along the bottom of the screen here, I'll use a slightly different method. Detail line, thin lines are fine. This time I'll just leave it into the straight line at the top here, which is the default that it always goes to. And I'm going to draw with an offset, 3300. And drawing with an offset, so from the boundary line, as I move the cursor, you can see as I draw right through, it's actually drawing a line up the top, up here. So if you press the space bar, you can see that line has now dropped down below. So spacebar will toggle between which side you want the line. So we want it down on this side, so I'll pick and just continue that line right out until it comes past that 10. Modify to finalize. I'll drag this line down. The edge of the seal, which is one of the other lines we need, it needs to come down to there. Create some intersecting points between a few lines so that I can pick to place. Detail line, I'll extend this one out. These are all just guidelines that I'll be deleting afterwards once the topographic is in place. Double check if I need anything else. D, E, and those two, I think I've got everything I need there. Just check whether I've got E in place. Detail line, and draw the line down and modify. If you prefer to use keyboard shortcuts, if you rest your cursor, you can see that it comes up as a DL for detail line to get just to initiate a command. So now we should be got all of those bits and pieces in place. Let's continue. We've got, I'll pop in a detail line straight from the corner post straight out to the boundary. Modify. That is to get B and C. I'll continue a line out so that I can get J and H, which is a continuation of from that point of our tidal boundary. Detail line, just drag a line straight out, modify to finish, and keep just flicking back into the little mud map that we drew on site while we were there. So I've got these all covered, these ones. We need to now work out what sort of grid was drawn on site. So 10 meters, 10 meters, 10 meters off from the side boundary, off from that colorbond fence, with a grid running through. Okay, so let's pop those lines in place. So back into Revit. Let's do our 10 meter grid. We can do this in a few different ways. Again, as using detail lines, we can draw a line with an offset of 10 meters. We can pick a line with an offset of 10 meters. There's many different ways depending on what you want to do. Pick lines will directly mimic what you're picking, and the 10 meters, 1, 2, 3, and you can see there that it's putting in a straight line across in there, and if I favour the other side, it goes out to the street. So getting that 10 meter mark can be done using pick lines, or you can do draw lines. 10 meters. Again, I'll use this one this time just so that I can pick back here, spacebar to move it across, just to get it a bit longer so I can see it quite easily, because I'm going to be deleting it later. Detail line, this time I'll use the pick lines at 10 meters, and we'll pop that one in, that one in, and that one in. 1, 2, 3, 4 lines down the middle. Just double check and make sure that's where we got. 1, 2, 3, 4 lines, and then we need one up the centre, coming 10 meters off from the side boundary, which just runs almost central down our site. Modify to finalize. So I think I've got junctions, intersecting points on this, and that's directly mimicking the mud map which is this one here, so that I can snap onto using interset or end point as I need to locate all of those points for the topography. So to start putting in the topographic representation, we'll go to the Massing and Site tab, and Toposolid is the command that we'll be using. One of the first things that we need to nominate with the topographic representation, this Toposolid, is that it'll always be constrained onto a level. Now if we put this to our floor plan level, then every time you lift your floor height up a little bit as you adjust your new design onto your site, the Toposolid will lift up and down with it. So we actually need to create another level that this Toposolid can be associated with, which doesn't move with all of these as we move our levels up and down. So I'll just cancel out of that. Do you want to discard? Yes, I do. So let's create another level. The best way we can see our levels is to pop down into an elevation. Now the existing west elevation should look like this. We've got 4 levels, and there is some dimensions already here. These dimensions are all locked up together. That means that as I change the height, they should all pop up and down. They all follow. You can see the 6.4 and the 1000. If I change that to 0, that should drop down to 5.4. So these dimensions being locked is why these are actually all staying together. You can physically pick and drag a level, and they all work together, they all stay together. In your design and putting together a floor plan, we need to be able to tweak our floor level up and down as we need, and we need the topography to stay separate and stay on its own. So the height of that new level we'll put in. You can create a new level easy enough, and we'll show you how to do that in a minute. What I'll do first is I'll show the crop region, because quite often with these elevations that have been created, the crop region will be down quite low, wherever the floor level is where we did our site analysis work. And as we start lifting these levels up and get beyond a crop view, you'll notice that we lose sight of anything that's outside of our crop view area. It's just a way of trimming up any drawing so that we don't see stuff on our floating outside of our title block once we get to printing stage. So I can hide the crop view and it still works, it still hides things behind it, or we can actually set this little button here, which is do not crop view. So if I pick on the do not crop view, it then reveals things that are sitting in behind. So we're going to add our new level, and we're going to work with our 100,000 millimeters, our 100 meters in the sky from where we are at the moment on our drawing screen. So I'm not sure where we're going to end up yet with our floor plan. I guess working with the contours that we did with our 100,000, that this is probably going to end up at maybe 101 or something like that. We'll see how it sits on the land and lift it up and down to suit. So let's add a new level in, and we'll set it up that was something that we can start creating our Toposolid command onto. There's a couple of ways you can create new things in Revit. You can track down where the command is for something, and that's where it is there. If you've got something on screen, you can also hover your cursor over an object, and this works with everything. Right mouse click and create similar. It's a handy little command that comes in the little pop-up menu when you do a right mouse click. Create similar, cancel that one, or you can pick level. They both end up in the same place. I'll wait until I get this little green line pop up. It tells me I'm in line with the rest of this levels that have been already set for us, and we'll pick from one end, drag it through to the other, pick there, modify to finalize the command. I've just popped this in at random. The height will be set, and the name we'll call this one as being our topographic. Just topographic. It's asked if we would like to rename the corresponding views, and that'll be over here in our little list, and I'll say yes, so that it comes up over here in the under floor plans topographic. So that's the an extra level that's appeared. These are all sitting in alphabetical. So when we do our topographic representation on this site, using the Toposolid command, it's going to be associated with this level and going up from there. You actually can't go below the level that it's associated with. So if we set this up at 200 and we try to put in 100, we're just going to get an error. So just reflecting back on to our level booking sheet, we actually, the lowest level we had was, didn't go less than 97,000 or 97 meters. So I'm going to set this one at 97123. Now when I press enter, this will disappear from my screen in front of me here and jump up into the air, because we're currently sitting randomly at 11 meters ish, or for this height. So I'll press enter, and the topographic level has popped up right up into here. Again, if you can't see it, just double check that your crop view has been turned off so that you can see everything outside of there. We should have our topographic sitting at 9700. I'll lift this one up. I'm thinking that I'll probably end up at 101500, and then I'll play with it from there as to what actual height it needs to be. But that should sit our floor plan roughly central on the site. And if I just zoom out so we can see that these levels will all jump up when I press enter. And all of my levels have jumped up. We've got our topographic sitting at 97, and we've got our floor plan sitting at 101500, with these 27,324 all set there with locked. And we can virtually delete those top two if we want to, because we're not doing two-story. If you have pieces levels left back down here, I'll just undo that step. You may find, if you've got one of these that is unlocked, and then I change this to the 101,500 and press enter, it's actually going to leave that top line behind because there's no lock on it. You can see that there's a level left behind. That was because it wasn't locked. Undo that step, pick on the dimensions, ensure that they're all locked up, and we'll set this one at 101,500. Last thing to do is to pick and drag the crop view right up into there. That's going to be an elevation for us later on, and something we can look at. So ultimately we have a topographic level. It's set at 97 meters, 97,000, because everything in Revit is millimeters. We can represent these things as meters, but it'll be all the inputs are put in millimeters. And if I pick and drag or change the height of my floor plan level, everything here changes because we're all locked together. Topographic stays the same. So that's where we need to be working. Now we can start to put in the topographic representation using the Toposolid command. I'll return back to the site analysis plan to do that. So clicking on the Toposolid, and the first thing it's asking for is to create the Toposolid boundary. So it's looking for where to put that in. Okay, let's look at putting in the Toposolid. So we'll pick the command, and first thing we need to do is to change this level. The constraints for putting in this Toposolid will be onto the topographic. So it's always going to be associated with the topographic. That's a pretty important point to get onto. Everything we put in here, or the heights, it's all going to be up and down associated with the topographic. So the boundary line, when we pick on this Toposolid, it's create the Toposolid boundary. So we need to define the outer limits of where we're going to put in our topographic representation. We've got all our guidelines in place to work to, so I'm just going to go straight to the rectangle button, and you can see there by the little diagram that pops up, pick on the two opposing corners to create a rectangle. I'll pick on that point there, which is going to be Z eventually, and right down that bottom corner there, and that will define, just pick modify to finish that command, that will define our topographic boundaries. Just pick the green tick to finish creating that topographic boundary. Let's have a look at it. If we go into the existing west elevation, we should be able to physically see that topographic, and also if we go to the 3D view, we should also see that topographic, and there's that wall that I used for doing the shadow, so I'll ditch that. So in our 3D view we have a flat piece of land without any fall or any heights or anything as yet. Whenever you get a save offered to you, always take it, so save the project. Okay, let's get some height associated with our Toposolid. Start to get some of the contour of the lands representing. In the site analysis, I actually can't select onto any of the Toposolid in this view. It's sitting below, down at the 97 mark, and we're sitting at 101, I think, something like that. So pop back into another view, doesn't matter which one, whether it's 3D or something. I'll use the west because I know it's here, and we can then return to the site analysis drawing. You can see the big blue rectangle, so the Toposolid is selected. We can then do modify sub-elements, and we can then start adjusting all of our heights. I'll start with these four outer ones, and we'll adjust the existing ones that are there already, and then we'll work with all of the internal placing all of the internal points for the rest of the Toposolid. Point J is that outer point. For point J I haven't finished my sheet yet. Point J I have 99.00, so we'll pop that in on there as 99.000 and pop that. Just a reminder that you can put that in there or you can put it in up here. This point over here is Z. Z over the back here has been the other extreme corner. Z, I look up my sheet, has a height of 102,760. Z 102,760, enter. You can see there that it says it's correct. And we get right down into that bottom corner, which is AB. AB, I haven't completed yet. Check my cheat sheet, it's 103,160. Press enter. And we've got a point down here which is point D, and we'll put that height in back in to that point there, and point D is 97,720. Press enter. So the first 4 points have been set, and I'll pick modify to finalize, and instantly we have our contours appearing. These are not yet accurate, it's only giving us those 4 points we can then look to work to. What are those points at the moment? So if I select onto that Toposolid and go edit type, it brings up the type properties dialog box for the Toposolid, and in amongst all of this we have contour display, where we can have a look at what those contours are. So we've got contours are coming up in the primary contours and secondary. It only gives us 2 different options so that we can change. You can make your secondary contours in like a light dashed grey or something, which we'll probably end up doing, and you can change this. You know, if I change that to 100, it'll make a lot more interval. Sometimes the way we do it is we leave a black dash line as our primary contour at 1 meter intervals, and then we have our 100s in between. So I'll pick apply at the 100 just so we can see how that looks. So you can see there's an awful lot of contours running through the site now. So it's probably a little bit of the overkill. Let's make them grey first. So modify and manage. Sorry, probably a bit of overkill. So let's go into probably a bit of overkill. So let's go into manage and pick on the object styles button here. This will bring up a dialog box, the object styles dialog box, for all of the different objects throughout Revit, which is pretty handy. So we can scroll down to find the topography, or I can type in a T, which will take me down to there. And here's the Toposolid there. Just remember, not the topography, that's the old version of the way Revit used to do it if you've got an old file. And here's our Toposolid. Expand the little plus and you can see the different ones here. You can see the line weight and what the line type and the colour and everything. So I'm going to make my secondary contours in grey just by sliding that up. You can pick on a defined grey that's already within the basic colours. Pick OK, and I'll come over here to solid, pick in that box next to the line pattern, and we'll change that one to maybe a dashed line of sorts. I'll do a dash double, and we'll see how that looks. Now the reason I'm doing this is just to define the differences between the solid topographic lines and the contour lines in between. And as we've done on previous projects, we can tag them, label contours, and we can drag a line all the way through, and it'll give us all of the numbers. So I'm finding the 100's a little bit too busy, so I'll pick on that topography. Finding these lines are all a bit busy, so I'm going to pick on the Toposolid, back into the edit type, and change the contour display here to these secondary contours. I'll set them up at 200 intervals and pick OK and OK. So it's just reduced the amount of the interval ones that are in there. Okay, now we need to get this a little more accurate. So how do we do that? Pick on the Toposolid, select on the modify sub-elements, and here we can start to add in our points. The TBM was our communications pit, and that was our 100, so let's place that one in first. So I've picked on the add point button. I'm going to set it up as 100, 1, 2, 3, and I'll pick on that, the edge of that pit, right where that was sitting, right here. And I shall just pick back on modify sub elements so that I can come back and pick on it just to check and make sure that everything worked okay. Add points. The corner post was 100150 at the corner post, and I might proceed out and do out on the road there and those bits now. But as we're putting these points in, and I'll pop one in the middle just so that I can double check, see how things are travelling. Maybe this corner post up the back here is Y, so I'll put that one in just so we can see the contours do their thing. Pop Y in. I've got Y as being 103060, 103060, and I'll place that onto that back corner point. I'll pick modify, pick it just to check. I just want to see that number 103060, and I'll pick on modify now just to cancel, and we can see the contours are now starting to shape the land. And we go to our west elevation, we should start to see the contour of the land in section, and we are sitting associated with our topographic, and it should be sitting 300. I think I noticed the topography is sitting, it's 300 millimeters thick. Must have noticed that in here. Yeah, there it is. So it's 300 millimeter thick. Anything below that, we'll get an error message. It won't let us put in anything below that 97. Let's have a look in 3D, and we should see the contours and the land forming that wedge shaped as it is at the moment. And we can continue putting in all of those points, modify sub elements, add point, and we need to put in every one of those points all the way around, directly matching all of these points need to be put in place so we can get a full representation of how that will look. Okay, if you didn't pick up on it, I made a bit of a mistake in that last one, so that's alright. Well, let's look at how to fix things. The mistake I made was that I've put in the full height of the topography as being as if Z and J were in line, forming a full rectangle out to this point here, which we haven't actually got that height point. So back into Revit, and we'll pick on the Toposolid and go Edit Sketch, and we just have to bring our line from here. I'll drag that out and I'll bring it back until it matches back onto that point, and do a little bit of a trim extend to stitch it up again. So that's the outer limits of the topography that the topographic that we are drawing based on the points that we've collected on site. Pick on the tick, and I'll go modify sub elements, and so it's actually maintained the 99 all the way back down to there, which is good. And I started putting in some of these points when I realized, so I'm going to pick on that point, press on the delete button on my keyboard, and I'll just check that point on the corner of the site there is correct, 99570, which is point G, and yeah, that's correct. So I can now proceed to plot all the rest of my points all along, and that'll be where the shape of the site will end up being. Modify sub elements, pick modify. That's what it'll end up looking like at the end. Okay, I've added all my points in and double checked some of them until I was confident that it was all working okay. So we can pick modify, and that should be the contours in place. You can see the fall of the land. It's up high and working its way down. You can see the fall of the land, which pretty much represents what we saw on site. I'll just pop in a few contour labels. I'm just picking each side of a line just to represent the contours. Clarity is always number one. So just finalising the last little bits and pieces, getting rid of a couple of these additional lines that were put in as guidelines, and looking pretty good. I'll turn the crop back on again and adjust that. It'll probably need to adjust that when it's in its sheet, so make sure that it's okay. Need to finalise putting in all of the contour labels, so there's a label on each contour. As I mentioned, clarity is number one, just making sure there's enough space around each, no text crossing over lines and text, to keep them apart where we can. And then from the modify tab, if we use the line work button, we can override a line to be invisible. As you can do this on edges and solid objects, and that edge running along there, if I just pick on that, that'll just take it out of being visible. Modify to finalize, just to indicate that the topography continues on. You could probably do this back one as well, I guess. Modify, delete that line there, and that should be contours in place, and wedge shaped topography ready for us to start setting our building into the slope of the land.